I've been farming here over 25 years, between 25 to 30. haven't calculated exactly, but I would say 28.
Hello, I'm Brian Welch, and Christine's trying to do a test to see how long I'm going to last out in the sun. We are in Lower Salem, Ohio, and we decided to do some trials with sorghum Sudan grass, and that is why you're here today. There are some benefits to being able to keep these animals out grazing versus confined. Our health seems to stay a lot better by keeping them spread out and keeping them grazing. Hello, I'm Brian Welch, and we are in Lower Salem, Ohio, and we decided to do some trials with sorghum Sudan grass, and that is why you're here today, to look at what we've put in. We started off with a stand that was not very successful, and we'll show you one that is much more successful and give you a little background on what we're doing. I started running stocker calves about 25 to 28 years ago, and did that for quite a while and got up to about 500 steers. And when three weights got up to about $1,000 a piece, we decided to start adding some cow-calf pairs and had to reduce the amount of stockers we were running because of the competition for the grass. And so currently we run around 250 to 275 stocker calves, and at one time we were up to about 130 brood cows, and we're slowly starting to decrease the brood cows. And depending on what happens with this, with the cattle markets, we may increase the stocker numbers, but long term, what's starting to look like a better investment is to reduce the inputs, reduce the labor, and I am seriously thinking about stockpiling more and more fall pasture with less animals here during the summer and being able to graze into January to early February with less inputs and less animals, and I'm fairly confident that we are going to be dollars ahead, and that the other side benefit for that is that we'll have less labor, and because I'm pretty much a one-person show with help from my family members, if I would get sick, then it'll also be less work for them. So I am always looking for ways to deal with the summer slump, and we're going to show you what we had today. And I have one stand I was extremely happy with, and I've got another stand that I'm not. I am always trying to evaluate what is going to be the most cost-effective options for feed and pasture for my animals, and there are some benefits to being able to keep these animals out grazing versus confined, and feed them pellets and grass beyond just the cost. Our health seems to stay a lot better by keeping them spread out and keeping them grazing. As I'm trying to make my evaluations, it's hard to do that without actually seeing what other people are experiencing, especially when you just show up for a short period of time. So what was extremely surprising for me is that the two fields we're going to show you today had almost the same amount of cattle wintered on them, and surprisingly, one field seemed to not do as well because of grass competition, whereas the other field showed more grass competition, but yet the sorghum Sudan seemed to take off and thrive in it more vigorously than in the field we were standing in. They were both planted on the exact same day, and I'll throw this out as a disclaimer. When we get to the other field, if you think that the rows look uneven, I finished that at 4 a.m., so it was very hard to see where I was at. But this field, I was able to follow the tire tracks in the daylight. It was planted about as perfect as it could be, and it just didn't compete. There's just nothing here, and so I was very disappointed with this. And the one thing that maybe goes against some of the other stuff that you'll read about is that I've played around a lot with oats and a lot of other forages to try to get some additional summer pasture and fall pasture. And with most of my experiences, especially with this, just like this one, I would have felt that I would have been money ahead to throw my money into nitrogen and just graze it and keep it in the rotation and get that benefit out of it. And honestly, you can see how much grass we have here. And when I seeded this, there wasn't any grass here. It was pretty much dirt with a few stick ups. So that's my 2 cents worth. But when we get over and look at the other one, you're gonna go, wow, that's a lot of tonnage for this time of year. And for the record, we have not had any rain here for over 3 weeks, and I think it's pretty close to 4 weeks. The nice thing about the amount of grass that we have, it's helping insulate the soil and doing a nice job to help hold the moisture that we have. All right, we decided to come to this spot so we could give some good images of the Lesbedisa growing up in rows. This is a spot where I had fed a round bale, and because of that, there wasn't much grass competition. And this is actually an Egyptian wheat. I was not pleased with the way the entire field seeded. What we ended up doing here is we used the new Land Pride no-till drill to put this in, and this actually was calibrated at a very low, believe it or not, this was only planted at 12 pounds per acre. So, to its credit, if it did not have competition for the low seeding cost of 12 pounds an acre, we got a lot of top growth if it hadn't had trouble competing with the grass. So, that's something to keep in mind. We calibrated the seeder with using the seed cup and the balance scale, and I'd heard that might not work that well, and it came out right on the money. When the drill emptied out, I was right where I needed to be, and I was very happy with how that worked out, because I was afraid that I'd have a drill empty halfway through, or that I would have a bunch of seed left over and need to go over it again. But it calibrated just about the way it was supposed to. So I was very happy with that. And when we see the other seeding, we put that in a lot heavier. But I honestly do not think that is the reason that we're going to see the top growth that we did. And we'll explain once we get over there. This is the second field that I was much happier with, and the differences between the fields is that this field was seeded at 50 pounds per acre versus the other one that was only seeded at 12. So that's an obvious difference. A couple things that I'd like to point out is that this one, at the time it was seeded, had much more grass competition. I expected this one to have trouble getting established, and I was pretty surprised that it didn't. And so this is the cow candy variety from Fowler Seed. The spot that I'm standing in right now, I had actually sprayed this with some 2,4-D right here, and I've got less wheat competition than in some of the other spots in the field. But I am pretty surprised as I look down through. There is a fair amount of undergrowth underneath this that I think still has some grazing value to help give it some density. Some of it is weeds and some of it is grass. But like I said, I was impressed with this. What this field was I had wintered 48 smaller 2-weight calves on it. They did not do much damage to the sod. And as I said, I had planned on putting the seed in because I expected them to tear it up pretty bad, but they didn't because they were so small. So I planted it right at the end of May. I will double check those dates with Christine and let her put them in this video. But at 40 days, we had something that we could have grazed, and at 50 days, it was much, much better. And honestly, we're not much past the 50-day mark. what's today? The 20 what?
First.
21st. We're at 50 days today is where we are. So this is 50 days of growth, and like I said, it definitely is ready for the cows to come into it. So we're on the southeast side of the farm, and we just came up to look at a water system. But while we're here, we're going to show you a pretty simple feed pad. This is just 10 yards of concrete that is set up with some 2x4 forms, and I've got a stamper or roller that I use to put this texture on the concrete. And I've got a lot of these pads around the farm, and my truck is set up so that I've got culverts cut in half that I put on the front side of the concrete, and I can just auger the feed into these along the edge of the road. And so we'll show you a quick shot of that before we go here, and I'll give you an idea of how that works. But it makes it pretty quick and efficient to feed a group of calves without too much labor. And you could throw hand buckets with a four-wheeler and a trailer just as easy if you didn't have a large amount of cattle. I thought I would show you how I disperse the feed in the feeders. And this is a bar 6 feeder from Kansas, and how this works. They have smaller versions that can mount on the back of four-wheelers or any type of, I should say, on the back of any UTV. But I've got a rope right here that I use to drop that down, and then I just drive along, auger the feed straight into the feeders. And you'll be amazed my son and I have calibrated this by buckets and counting, but when you get a feel for it, I can normally fill feeders and be within a pound or two from time to time, and keep it pretty accurate. So, as I said, I've got a rope set up in the truck so that when I'm driving from one feeder to the next, I can just pull this back up. And it pulls easier when I've been using it, but I pull it up and go to the next feeder and drop it again. That way I don't have to keep getting out of the truck and hooking it up. So that feeder holds 1,100 pounds of pellets. So depending on how much you're going to feed per day, that'll let you figure out how many trips you can take back to fill it up. So we decided to come up and show you a little bit with the water system. We have over 10,000 feet of buried water lines, and one of the most challenging things that we had to deal with was the fact that the elevation of these water tanks versus where the pond is located is a 230 vertical foot lift. So the first years that we had it installed, I was burning up some water pumps from having them kick on and off. So what I did was, if you look at the hilltop that's just off the edge of the trees right there, that is that high spot at the 232 feet. And we installed a 2,000 gallon cistern from Carr up on top, up there. And I kick my water pump on once a day, and it takes about 6 hours to fill that cistern and fill my water tanks. And then I kick that pump off, and it gravity feeds down to all these tanks and keeps them full for the rest of the day. If the tanks weren't empty and we have excess water, it's designed to just run out onto the ground. And so there's no damage of blowing any pipes or anything by building too much pressure if we end up overfilling it. So that has worked extremely well. I'm getting a lot more life out of the pumps, and I feel good that we've got water in all these paddocks stretching all the way around through here. So I've been really happy with the water system. This has been pastured very heavily in the winter,
and had a lot of sod damage. And I am pretty impressed with how much weed suppression I got from the sorghum Sudan. This is the Egyptian wheat on August 18th. It is the first time that I'm coming in to graze this. And in the areas where it was not shaded out from too much grass, it has grown very well. I say this is 6 to 7 foot tall. We planted some Lespedeza in this mix. This is only planted at a total rate of 10 pounds per acre. You can see the Lespedeza coming up through pretty well. And you know, this was a very cost-effective mix, but it was not nearly as dense as the cow candy. And the reason that what I'm showing you looks as dense as it is because of the fact that there was a lot of foot traffic here from the spring when it was planted. Had a lot of cockleburs come up through it. I'm going to end up grazing this off, spraying it out, and replanting it. But I'm much more pleased now than I was in June and July with the way this was going to produce. This is an area of the field where the Egyptian wheat did not get as tall, but cattle are eating a pretty good mix of annual weeds as well as the Egyptian wheat. Like I said, we're going to graze this off and spray it out and probably put it back to orchard grass.
Appreciate you coming out today. If anybody has any questions, I'm always glad to talk to you about what I do, and I can't say that it's right or wrong. I just give you my experiences and let you make your own decisions. Email is by far the easiest way for me to have time to read stuff and look it over, but you're also welcome to have my phone number and text me if you like, and not a lot of time for phone calls because we have limited service, but if you want to talk at 10 o'clock at night, that's normally when my phone calls get made. So I'll give Christine all my information to put out there if you're interested and have any questions.